From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Welcome to this Tuesday edition of Washington Watch. We appreciate you tuning in and making us part of your day. Well, coming up, tens of thousands marched on D.C. today in support of Israel.
May God have compassion on them and bring them out from darkness and the shadow of death. May God break their bonds, deliver them from their distress, and bring them swiftly back to their families' embrace.
That was Oklahoma Senator James Lankford praying for the hostages at the event earlier today. The Washington Stand's reporter Sarah Holliday was there, and she's going to join us later with a report. The U.S. House of Representatives is about to vote on a measure to keep government running beyond November the 17th. Well, that is when the current funding ends. House Republicans are divided over the measure that freezes current spending, with a majority of the House Freedom Caucus wanting to fight for a reduction in spending in this temporary bill.
We're not surrendering, we're fighting, but you have to be wise about choosing the fights. You gotta fight fights that you can win, and we're going to, and you're going to see this House majority stand together on our principle, and we're going to do that.
That was House Speaker Mike Johnson saying the fight would be forthcoming on more favorable terrain. Today's Consumer Price Index should indicate that Bidenomics is really not working for the American family. Inflation is up 3.2% over last year. Now, since President Biden took office, the Consumer Price Index has risen over 17%. Now, despite high interest rates, inflation continues at a high level. We're going to talk with E.J. Antoni in just a moment. And good news today out of Finland.
Today we celebrate the necessary and common sense decision of the Helsinki Court of Appeal to fully acquit Dr. Päivi Räsänen and Bishop Juhana Pohjola. The fact that their free speech case has dragged on for over 4 years and never came to trial is outrageous, but thankfully justice has prevailed.
That was ADF International Director Paul Coleman speaking after Finnish Member of Parliament Päivi Räsänen was again acquitted of hate speech for quoting the Bible. Alliance Defending Freedom International represented Päivi, and today on the program we're going to have the President and General Counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom, Kristen Wagner. She's going to be joining us to talk about the case. If you missed my interview yesterday with Mike Davis of Article 3 Project, you should go to the archives at tonyperkins.com and watch that interview about lawfare and how the left has weaponized government against conservatives using the courts. Well, today we're going to follow up on actions Congress needs to take to protect and preserve the republic. That's coming up later. And finally, 27 Republican senators have sent a letter to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin yesterday demanding he rescind the Biden administration abortion travel policy that violates U.S. law. Secretary Austin could immediately resolve the crisis that Senate Scare Leader Chuck Schumer says Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville's hold on the military appointees is creating.
As a result of Senator Tuberville's holds, America's national security is now paying the price. Our military readiness is paying the price. And our military spouses and kids who can't plan the next chapter in their lives even though they've served us for many, many years, they are paying the price too. Patience is wearing thin with Senator Tuberville on both sides of the aisle.
And guess what? The Biden Department of Defense could fix this by simply going back to the policy that Congress passed. And that is, taxpayers do not fund abortion or facilitate it. We'll talk with the senator who led this effort, North Carolina Senator Ted Budd. Joins us later. Our word for today comes from Hebrews chapter 8. Now, this is the main point of the things we're saying. We have such a high priest, that is Jesus Christ, who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord erected and not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. Therefore, it is necessary that this one also have something to offer. Unlike the earthly priest whose work was never done, Jesus finished his work of offering himself as a sacrifice for our sins, and then he sat down at the right hand of God the Father. He's seated in the true tabernacle in heaven, the Holy of Holies. In the earthly replica of the tabernacle, the high priest only entered the Holy of Holies once a year to sprinkle blood on the mercy seat. Jesus remains there, having obtained mercy for us forever. To find out more about our journey through the Bible, go to frc.org/Bible. We may be talking to one of the House members where the votes are taking place right now, and while House Speaker Mike Johnson and the GOP leadership seek a fast-track continuing resolution for government funding into 2024, the latest consumer price index was also released this morning, with prices remaining stubbornly high for working American families. We're going to go first to E.J. Antoni. He is a public finance economist and research fellow at the Heritage Foundation to talk about these latest numbers. EJ, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, thank you for having me back.
So, EJ, what did we learn today from today's Consumer Price Index release?
Well, unfortunately, what we continue to see is that Americans are getting poorer because we are seeing prices rise faster than earnings, and we are seeing the continuation of relatively high interest rates pummeling people on everything from mortgages to credit card debt and everything in between. I mean, all in all, the typical American family today is about $7,400 poorer than when Biden took office.
It was interesting. I was just reading an AP article came out today. Basically, you read this spin, and they're basically saying, oh, everything is working. We're seeing inflation come down. This should be the American family. While not feeling it, they need to realize that the economy's better.
My goodness, I liken it to the beginning of the NFL season when you hear a lot of commentators say that a team is better than its record. You know, maybe it had a fluke game where the referees had a lot of bad calls that blew the game for the team, or maybe they had some players that were injured, couldn't play that week, whatever the case may be. And so a team may be, quote unquote, better than its record. But you only get to say that for a few weeks, right? When you're halfway through the season or even further, it becomes more and more difficult to make that excuse. At some point, your record is your record. And the record of Bidenomics is very clearly one of failure.
So, EJ, let's talk about how do we get this under control? Certainly, I don't think we continue to, with debt-fueled spending is going to help out the situation.
No, you're absolutely right. And actually, that's precisely what needs to stop is all of this debt-fueled spending, which is largely financed actually by creation of money at the Federal Reserve. And so all of that needs to end. We need to shrink down government because the more we grow the federal budget, the more we end up having to shrink the family budget. That's exactly what we've seen over the last 2.5 years. People don't like it. It hasn't worked. And we need to stop it. We need to reverse it. All you need to do in order to reverse it, though, is to simply reverse the policies that got us here. And again, that's government spending.
But that's not what we see being proposed by the Biden administration, even in supplemental spending. We're seeing now with the current debt, the servicing of that debt now has reached a point of about $1 trillion a year. How do we sustain that?
Oh, you can. It's not sustainable at all. And you're absolutely right that the things that are being proposed by this administration and the big spenders in Congress are precisely the opposite of what we need. And unfortunately, things are really starting to snowball at that point, or at this point, I should say. And here's where things get dangerous. As the debt continues to grow and the cost to service that debt, which you just mentioned, it's over $1 trillion a year now, as that continues to grow, you very quickly get to a point where the cost of servicing the debt becomes so big that it is fueling the deficit, which makes the debt even bigger, which further increases the cost of servicing the debt, and so on and so on. And again, you can see how that quickly snowballs. We are already at the point where just interest on the debt, just that one expense alone, is consuming 40% of all personal income taxes.
EJ, when you look at the Fed, and there's speculation, what are they going to do? Are they going to continue to raise the interest rates? Every time they raise that interest rate, the government ends up spending more to service its debt. So this becomes kind of almost a death spiral.
Oh, certainly. But we have to remember that this is a problem that they created for themselves. The only reason that, I shouldn't say the only reason, but one of the key reasons why we have so much government debt today and consumer debt as well is because the Federal Reserve artificially kept rates far too low for far too long. And so it basically hid the true cost of that debt for literally more than 2 decades. When you make the cost of borrowing money so obscenely low, don't be surprised when more people, including the government, want to borrow money. And by keeping that cost of servicing the debt so low, it allowed the politicians to get away with growing the debt by trillions upon trillions of dollars. Well, now the chickens have come home to roost.
EJ, as we're actually talking right now, the House is just debating over a continuing resolution to basically move funding, freezing funding at its present level into January. It's as we talked about in this program yesterday. It's a tiered or a laddered approach. Part of the funding ends in January, part in February. Are you optimistic that as they return to actually doing appropriations bills, that is a step in the right direction of trying to get a hold of this out-of-control spending, since we've just been doing these omnibus and continuing resolutions for years?
Well, I understand the logic behind what the Speaker is trying to do here, and I do sympathize with the fact that he just took over this role only a short while ago. He is finally, he's basically still in the process of putting his staff together. So they haven't really had much time to put forward, to craft and put forward actual spending bills here. The problem is that just as he hasn't had a lot of time, the nation may not have much time left either. Because again, as we just said, things are beginning to snowball. And eventually they're going to get to the point where it doesn't matter how hard we try to stop them, the momentum is going to take us over the falls. So again, while I sympathize with the Speaker for the position in which he has been put today, I'm not sure that kicking the can any further down the road is doing enough to solve the problem.
Final question for you, EJ Antoni. The 2024 elections, these numbers, I mean, you can spin the numbers, the media can spin the numbers, but the American family is feeling it. Is this going to be a primary issue in the 2024 elections, the economy?
I think so, especially when you consider that the last several months things have deteriorated noticeably. I think that's a key reason why several polls by left-leaning media outlets, such as the New York Times, have all of a sudden placed Trump at a huge advantage to Biden. In one of them, for example, Trump won 5 of 6 key swing states and captures over 300 electoral votes if the election were held today, according to this poll. And I mean, that's not really surprising when you think about the fact that everything, especially necessities, have gone up so dramatically in price under Biden, while wages have nowhere near kept up. Look at housing, for example. Just as one quick example here, the monthly mortgage payment on a median price home, we're not talking a mansion, just a median price home, it's 112% higher today than it was when Biden
You can't hide that. You can't spend it. You can't hide it.
$13,000 or more a year for the exact same house.
EJ, we're out of time. We've got to go to a break. Folks, stick with us. We're back after this.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us on this Tuesday, right? Tuesday? It is Tuesday, yes. Making sure. Crazy day here. The 2-minute vote's on the House floor, so we're kind of rearranging the lineup here today, as we were going to be talking about the CR earlier. We got members in the vote, so we're just going to see how the program plays out. But this I do know. Earlier today in Finland, an appeals court dismissed hate speech charges against Päivi Räsänen for social media posts that cited a Bible verse and traditional Christian views on marriage and sexuality. Päivi, who is also a member of the Finnish parliament and the country's former interior minister, was cleared of charges along with Bishop Johannes Poilo of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland. While we celebrate the good news, every Christian must remain aware of the left's continuing use of the legal system to, it's to persecute those with a biblical worldview. And don't think that this is something that happens in other countries. Joining me now to discuss this is Kristen Wagner, President and General Counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom, who coordinated Päivi's legal defense. Kristen, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Well, thank you for having me.
So congratulations on today's news. This is I think it was a total of 4 years that this has been going on. Give us your thoughts on this case and what this may lead to.
Well, it is a monumental victory. I mean, 4 years, they say the process is the punishment. 4 years of criminal penalties, of those penalties hanging over Päivi's head, of not knowing what the future holds, of interrogations and charges. In fact, the charges that were filed against her were criminal in nature under the criminal code for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Simply being labeled as someone who engages in hate speech, whether you're convicted or not, itself carries a punishment. So we're thrilled that Päivi is exonerated today on appeal. But you're right to point out that there's a rise of global censorship that's going on right now, and that we face it here in the United States as well.
Now, Kristen, she said that she was hoping that this would set a precedent that would provide protection for others. It may for a while, but I'm concerned. I mean, this was one state prosecutor who simply had, even though the district court unanimously acquitted her before, this was appealed, taken to an appellate court, this was all driven by one state prosecutor. All you have to do is have one person in this process that has wants to go on a Christian hunt and you're going to end up with another case like this.
It does set national precedent, and so that national precedent should apply to others in this situation. But you're exactly right that rogue prosecutors can choose to try to distinguish that precedent in the future. And I do think it also points out the importance of citizen standing, though. You know, many of the nations throughout Western civilization have had constitutions or laws that protect free speech, religious freedom, but those laws aren't worth the paper they're written on if the citizens become apathetic or don't enforce them, as Pivy did here.
That's really important, and that's important here in the United States as we see this infringement upon religious freedom. And religious freedom, you know, just to restate the obvious for those of us here, religious freedom is not just the ability to worship as you choose, it's the ability to live out your faith, instructed by your faith. And if we don't have people in this country willing to stand up when they're challenged or that freedom is infringed upon, we do lose it.
Absolutely. We also not only lose the right to be able to speak about and to live out the truth in our own lives, but we lose the right of self-government, and we blur the lines with dictatorships and give totalitarian and authoritarian regimes power to silence the truth and silence debate on issues. So it's a very, very dangerous precedent that this prosecutor tried to set here. And I think it's also worth pointing out who they went against. I mean, they tried to convict of crimes a longstanding member of their parliament, a very public official, very well loved, recently reelected. So they're sending a message to the average person in Finland that if we can get her, we can get you as well.
Right. Well, it's intimidating. It has a very chilling effect. I recently met with the Finnish ambassador to the United States. We discussed this case. He was very tight-lipped about it. But I'm curious as to whether or not they may go back and review their process, allowing a state prosecutor to go after and essentially persecute someone for 4 years, knowing that the court unanimously threw this out.
I sure hope that they do. I mean, these laws that essentially create hate crimes out of what they call hate speech are very vague, they're subjective, they can be interpreted and applied in all kinds of different ways. They're very destructive and dangerous, and we see them proliferating throughout Western Europe. The UK right now has a law now that prevents silent prayer outside of abortion clinics. In Mexico, we see others who are being prosecuted as well for their speech. And we certainly are seeing the beginnings of it here in the United States in a variety of areas. So we have to stand, and I think it's worth noting, the prosecutor can still appeal this verdict as well.
Right.
And we're hoping that the prosecutor general will choose not to do so, though.
I think the pressure is going to be tremendous for them not to do that, but we've got to remain vigilant. Kristen, final question for you. ADF does a great job, and in most of the cases, and I don't know what the percentage is, it's got to be 99, 98% of the cases you take up, you win. But you've got to have people willing to fight, stand up, take the public pressure, criticism, but in the end, we all win. Your final thoughts on the state of religious freedom and what people in this country need to be doing?
I'm hopeful about the state of religious freedom and free speech because I do think that believers in particular are waking up to the need to stand not only for their own rights, but the rights of future generations. And what we see is that when we stand with courage and boldness on the truth, which is something you've done for so many years, Tony, I think that God honors that. It may not be in the timing or the way that we want in a particular moment, but over the long haul, he will honor it. And I've seen that play out in our cases with our clients time and time again, including with Pivy in this case.
Well, we are so grateful for all of you at Alliance Defending Freedom, knowing that you're there to represent believers and those who appreciate the Constitution and our freedoms in the courts. Kristen Wagner, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, folks, don't go away. We're going to, after this break, we're going to have a report from one of our Washington Watch reporters going to be joining us, actually our Washington Stand reporters joining us to give us a rundown on the March for Israel that took place on the Mall today. So don't go away. More Washington Watch still ahead.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. In Pakistan, Asif Pervez is on death row for allegedly sending a blasphemous text message. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us. The website is tonyperkins.com. And let me again encourage you, if you've not yet joined the effort to pray for the House Speaker, today is evidence that he needs it. With the House taking up I'm watching C-SPAN here as they're voting, series of 2-minute votes, and they're going to be voting on the continuing resolution, which would, as we talked about yesterday, continue funding until till January, getting them past the holidays, which is where they are usually jammed with these omnibus. This is where they lump all of these spending bills in one and they force them on them the last minute. So this gives them time by pushing this over into January and February. And in the meantime, they're finishing the appropriations bills, which I believe is going to provide a better terrain to wage a fight over government spending. But if you'd like to join the effort to pray for the Speaker and for the Congress, we got to get this right. I'm telling you, as EJ was talking about earlier, we don't have a lot of time. When you look at the way we're spending money, you look at the instability around the world, the lawlessness on our own streets, we need to be praying because we got to get it right. So if you'd like to pray for the Speaker and the way forward, text Speaker to 67742, 67742, the word Speaker. Well, as I mentioned, thousands assembled on the National Mall today for the March for Israel. It was a gathering organized by Jewish organizations to show support for Israel and condemn anti-Semitism. House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke at the event alongside Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer spoke. Members of the Senate and House Bipartisan Task Force for combating anti-Semitism also took the stage to pray for the hostages, as we heard earlier when Senator James Langford, a portion of his prayer. Well, join me now to give us an overview of what took place on the mall. Sarah Holliday, reporter for the Washington Stand. Sarah, welcome to Washington Watch.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us about today's event. What stuck out to you as you were there on the mall?
Well, it was crowded. They are estimating hundreds of thousands of people were there. There were people that came in just saturated in white and blue with the flag of Israel draped on their backs, painted on their faces. They were young people, old people. I spoke to a child of Holocaust survivors. There were people whose family members are hostages with Hamas. There was a lot of representation there for these people, all fighting for the same cause. And yet, it was just a pleasant event. People were laughing and singing, and I saw 3 Jewish men holding hands and dancing. It was a really unique place to be today.
So how would you describe the spirit then? It was both somber, but yet it was friendly, hopeful, optimistic. How would you describe it?
Yes, to all of that. It's crazy because these people, I mean, they have people that they love or know that are being raped, abused, decapitated, kidnapped. They have every reason to be absolutely outraged. And yet, when we all came together today, there was this sense of hope and this sense of unity that I would have to say that permeated the entire event, was that there was unity. There were people from all over America. There were people that flew in, probably from out of the state. There were just so many people there, all there because they were fighting for the right to life. Israel, the Jewish people, they all have the right to exist. And that, I believe, was the unifying message that brought everybody there together. And in a sense, us being unified, I believe, brought joy, even though there's so much to be sorrowful over right now.
You know, that's very interesting, Sarah, when you look at the contrast between what took place today and 2 weeks ago when the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas marchers converged on Washington, and we saw the violence at the White House. We saw windows busted out of businesses. We saw the obscene and hateful chants. That wasn't there today.
Definitely not. Maybe it's a reporter in me, but I definitely showed up looking for it. I was expecting there to be some kind of counter-protest, but all that I saw was one lady holding up a sign. She wasn't even saying anything. She was just completely silent. But outside of that, no chaos. Like I said, there was laughter, there was music, there was dancing. There were people that, I mean, if I could speak for them, I would say a lot of them want to keep this as little in the political arena as possible, because this isn't just politics. This is life. This is about being able to exist, to have a voice, to be able to live without constantly being threatened by people who hate you. And so I would say that that is what this is about. For other people, I would say politics probably does fuel them, and they're angry and they're just bursting out into these chaotic scenes that we see and that we saw here just 2 weeks ago. And so now we have people that are coming together who don't want that to be what brands them. They want to be branded by this sense of, we care about people. We care about our people. We care about the people who are being kidnapped, who are being abused, who are being raped, who have been persecuted since the founding of this nation. This is all they have. And that's what this is about, is keeping what they have and keeping their lives.
Having the ability to protect themselves. That's all they're asking for. Sarah Holliday, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your work at the Washington Stand.
Thank you so much.
And folks, you could read her report at the Washington Stand, which every day we have stories coming to you from Washington, from the Washington Stand, all from a biblical worldview. So to find out more about that, go to TonyPerkins.com or just Google the Washington Stand. All right, coming up next, we are going to be talking a little bit later with one of the members as they break away from the House floor. They're going to call us on the phone, and we're going to discuss the vote on the continuing resolution that's coming up. They're continuing to vote even now as I'm watching various bills or various amendments on the floor. All right, also we're going to talk to Senator Budd from North Carolina next after the break, so don't go away. More Washington Watch straight ahead.
The world is hurting, streets are filled with crime, families are broken, sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you are the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these SageCons yourself, go to frc.org/SageCon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to tonyperkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word Bible devotion. Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us. The website, tonyperkins.com. All right, as Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville continues his stand to protect life and the rule of law by objecting to the Pentagon's illegal abortion travel funding policy, he's simply putting a hold on military promotions, meaning he's not blocking them, all right? So this is very, very clear. He's just making them vote, that's all. And they voted on some, but it takes up time, which they don't like to do. They would rather spend your money. Well, Democrats are continuing to ratchet up the pressure on Senator Tuberville. They want him to fold. The Biden administration claims that Senator Tuberville's holds on military appointees is a detriment to military readiness. Let me tell you what's a detriment to military readiness. The Biden administration policies. Well, yesterday, 27 Republican senators responded with a letter to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, noting that he, the secretary, is the one that broke a promise to the American people by politicizing the military and demanding that he rescind the abortion travel policy. Join me now to discuss this is North Carolina Senator Ted Budd, who led this effort. He serves on 4 Senate committees, including the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Budd, welcome back to Washington Watch.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So your letter to Secretary Austin gets straight to the point. He's the one that's broken his promise to the American people not to politicize the military, and his actions have harmed and threatened the institution and the norms within our democracy. So it's not Senator Tuberville that has to retreat. It should be the Pentagon that goes back to the policies that were in place before.
Well, we got to change the narrative back to the truth. And then again, exactly, it's not Senator Tuberville is the problem here. The letter simply says, one, you promised not to politicize the military, and you did. And the other is that the simplest way to fix this is to change the policy. I've told him in person in multiple hearings, I said the way to fix this is with the stroke of a pen. You could fix this by this evening, the evening of the hearing, and he chose not to. You know, he was a well-decorated warrior at one point who served our nation, and now he's become completely politicized by the Biden administration. It's very, very disappointing. And the narrative needs to be the truth, and that this is not about Tuberville. He's simply standing up for a good policy. And then, Tony, when we asked the DOD, how many women do you think this would affect or in their worldview? And they said this would probably serve 4,000 women. And then we asked for, first of all, they didn't know. Then they said 4,000. And when the data actually came out, it was 12. They have done all this, holding up our military for over 200, close to 300 days for 12 incidences, which is probably even illegal.
Now, some would say, well, oh, it's just 12, then why are they objecting to this? But I want to bring it back to the issue of the law. The law says, and this is something that has been in place for a long time, this idea, it's been bipartisan, that taxpayers wouldn't be forced to participate in funding or facilitating abortions. And that's what you and the other senators are simply trying to hold the Pentagon to.
Well, I appreciate my colleagues standing strong on this. And this is, again, about politicizing the military and the woke left agenda. This is not about military strength and readiness and lethality, which we've got so many things going on in the world right now that we need to be ready for. This is a complete distraction. We need these people in place. Schumer hasn't brought them to the floor. The ones that have come to the floor, we forced those votes. So we're all about military readiness. But at the same time, this is about a left agenda.
Let's talk about the effort now. Democrats are working to circumvent this established practice of members being able to place holds. That's one of the few things that those in the minority can use to kind of slow the process down. They're talking about changing the rules. You actually referenced this in your letter, that would create a very toxic environment going forward.
Well, unfortunately, it went through the Rules Committee today. It hasn't gone to the larger floor. Standing Order 444, which it does circumvent this, and it would expire after a while, so it's not permanent, but unfortunately, it does end run this. When the best way is, let's vote on these individuals for military readiness.
What do you think happens to that rule when it goes to the floor?
Well, because we're in the minority, I want to be in the majority, and that's what we're working towards in 2024. But right now, with so many that see this very differently, then I think it would be a short-term but unfortunate change.
So, that will require what, 10 Republican votes to make that happen?
And unfortunately, I believe that would happen. So pray that it wouldn't. But again, it's looking like it will.
Well, that's an action item for you, folks. We need to be calling your senators and encourage them to stand with Senator Tuberville. So I'm going to give you that number in a moment. Senator, just a couple minutes left with you. Thanks for joining us today. But the Biden administration reports now circulating that they are discussing, or they're talking about removing sanctions, unfreezing more money that would go to Iran, $10 billion by lifting certain sanctions. What do we know about that?
Well, let's go back to before October 7th of last month, and we see what happened. I mean, they released $6 billion for a possible prisoner exchange, and that led to the worst attack on the Jewish population since the Holocaust. 30-some Americans were killed. Many are held hostage, including North Carolinians, where I'm from. It's absolutely devastating what they've done, and it's been this soft on Iran policy that's allowed this to happen. Now they're thinking about not $6 billion like pre-October 7, but they're thinking about $10 billion. This can only make it worse in a time where we need to be strong, Tony, and it's completely unfathomable that they would want to do this. It's weak, and weakness is provocative on the world stage, and that's exactly what Biden's doing.
I'm almost speechless when you consider that they've not only been behind the attacks fueling Hamas and Hezbollah against our ally Israel, but they've actually attacked their proxies have attacked our military in different parts of the world.
Repeatedly, when you look at the 50-some attacks that have happened in not too many in the last week or two in Syria, when you look at Iraq, and then just very timid responses from the Biden administration, again, that's more of this weakness being provocative. So you've got to have a strong leader on the world stage. We had that under President Trump. We can have it again, but unfortunately, we don't have that with the Biden administration.
And that's being driven by the State Department lifting these sanctions. It's very troubling. Any chance that can be stopped, or is that's just going to happen?
I would express outrage over this, and hopefully people that saw the connection between the $6 billion and the terrorist attack from Hamas on October 7th, if they see that connection, then let's see how bad it could be for the $10 billion. So I hope more people are aware of this and express their outrage to the Biden administration.
Yeah, they may, they use the $6 billion for little Satan, use the $10 billion for big Satan. I mean, we know that they would love to take us out as well. Senator Ted Budd, I want to thank you for joining us. Always great to talk with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tony.
And thanks for leading that letter, too, on behalf of Senator Tuberville standing.
And I thank my colleagues as well. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right. All right, Ted Budd in the Senate. I'm glad he's there. A great change there in the Senate, having Senator Ted Budd there from North Carolina, his strong conservative, doing great work there. All right, here's the switchboard number. All right, you got some homework. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. That is the number to the switchboard. Okay, so you heard the senator talking about a rule change that is making its way through the process. It went through the committee. It's going to go onto the House floor. Now, this rule change, what it addresses is the senators have this privilege of putting a hold on a nomination, or in this case, promotion in the military. Doesn't stop it. It just requires a vote. Okay, so what they generally do is they do all of these promotions at one time by unanimous consent. That's when you see on C-SPAN, nobody's on the floor, but they're voting on things. Somebody moves it through. Well, he's requiring them to go and actually cast votes until they stop this illegal policy of funding abortion. So they want to change the rule to take away the ability of Senator Tuberville to do that. So call your senator, and especially your Republican senators, and encourage them to stand with Senator Tuberville and not change the rules. 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. All right, we're going to get an update now from the House floor. Congressman Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin joins us. He's joining us by phone. As I said, they're in a series of votes that are taking place, and so he has stepped off the floor to give us an update. Glenn, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good. I just stepped off the floor. We just wrapped up the vote on what we call a continuing resolution. We were a little bit behind the eight ball here. Your listeners will recall that we went through a long process without a speaker, so we got kind of behind things. And today, Congressman Johnson, Mike Johnson from Louisiana, who is just such a tremendously good Christian, he realized we were really going to shut down the government or trying to give us a couple more months to get our work done. And he made impassionate pleas. He made like 4 or 5 impassioned pleas today to our Republican members to do what we call a continuing resolution, because he did not want to shut down the government. The public does not like government shutdowns. I know individual members of your listening audience might, but believe me, people who've been around here a while know that if the Republicans shut down the government, the public is against them. So I voted. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Glenn, I agree. I mean, you've got to have a plan. What would be the plan? What would be gained by shutting down the government at this point? I can't think of anything that would be gained.
No, and Mike, I'm not supposed to talk what goes on in behind closed conference, but I'll tell you. Behind closed doors, Mike asked 4 times. He asked the Republicans who did not want to keep the government open, how is this going to end? How are you going to wind up ahead of the game by shutting down the government? Because eventually it's going to reopen. And his point was it'll reopen when the Republicans get beat up in the news media. And none of these people who are voting against Mike today, breaking from our new speaker, could give him a reason or an explanation of how this was going to end. So I felt sorry for our speaker. Most Republicans stuck with him, but on this first test, a lot didn't. And I really felt sorry for Mike today. He should have got every single Republican to vote for him when he called for the vote, and sadly, about 95 Republicans voted against him.
I think we had Republicans voting yes, 127, voting no, 93, Democrats voting yes, 209, 2 voting no. So this continuing resolution, what was called a laddered continuing resolution, moves forward to the Senate. But Glenn, this is what Mike has articulated, is that they're going to fight. You just got to have favorable terrain to have the fight on. I think working through the appropriations bills, getting more time to get the ratchet down the spending, put in the policy, that's going to happen in the appropriations process.
Absolutely. The most important thing is who wins the arguments over what's in those bills, not when we pass the bills. And shutting the government down for 2 weeks till a few moderate Republicans join with the Democrats and keep things open only makes the Republicans look bad. And we did not want Mike, within his first month on the job, have a government shutdown because he couldn't control what the other Republicans were doing.
Right. But I've looked at many of these appropriations bills are really good. And as the speaker the speaker's made the point, we haven't done this in over 20 years. We have not used the appropriations process.
Right. And even in this what we call laddered CR, you're not going to be able to put every appropriation bill together and have one of these 2,000 page behemoths. You're going to have to break out a separate vote on education, a separate vote on national defense, a separate vote on military construction and veterans affairs, general government. Hopefully we'll get as many separate votes as possible so we know what's in the bills, which will be really a feather in the cap of Mike Johnson. But in order to get there, we had to win today, which is say give him more time to get things done. And we did that. Like I said, I was disappointed that some of my Republican colleagues wouldn't stick with Mike on this, but enough of us did that we're not going to shut down the government.
Glenn Grothman, let me ask you a final question for you. There was a lot of unity in the conference. Are we fractured again, or are we going to be able to pull together and move forward?
Well, I think Mike will pull us together. Mike is such a sincere guy. Everybody knows he's trying to do the best he can. And, of course, right now, because we had a new Democrat sworn in yesterday, we only can afford to lose 3 votes. So, it's tough to have 218 of 221 stick together. But if anybody can do it, Mike can do it because he's so well respected. Right. I was just disappointed so many of them voted against Mike today.
Yeah, I don't think you could get all of them to agree on the same flavor of ice cream. I mean, it's a difficult job. Glenn, thanks so much for stepping off the floor and giving us a call. Always great to talk with you.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk later on the things that are in these bills, because you're right, there's a lot of good stuff in the Republican bills, but we're eventually going to have to negotiate with the Senate. We'll check off and see what we're winning on and what the left is winning on.
And that's where we have the fights, because we're going to be on more favorable terrain at that point.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
Glenn Grothman, good to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yep. Okay, bye.
All right, folks, thank you for joining us as well. But again, action items for you. Be sure and call your senators, 202-224-3121. Do not change the rules to circumvent the courageous stand that Senator Tuberville is taking. All right? And pray for Mike Johnson. All right, until next time, I leave you with the encouraging words of the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 6, where he says, stand, and then just keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.